It's coming.
Oh, stream stuff. Oh, that didn't get.
It's Gandalf here.
It's Gandalf and Gollum here.
Gandalf and Gollum.
Because I got the Gollum haircut.
Nice. Hey everybody, welcome in. Joel and I were just chatting before we went live. He's like, "What do you look like? You look like a wise professor or Gandalf?" And somebody had called me Gandalf. So yeah, it's
I think it was Eureka. I'm accusing or giving credit to Eureka on that one. I think he said that.
Okay, good, because Gandalf the Grey is his actual name.
I wasn't going to mention that part of it, but since you brought it up, a little. It's nice to see someone, for guys like me, it's nice to see someone who still has all their hair at least have it turn gray.
Right, at least have it turn gray. Yeah, it's getting grayer and grayer. All right. Well, hello, Joel. Good to see you.
Michael, how you doing?
You know not to ask that question because I'll take over.
Michael, what tangent would you like to go on today?
Well, I love the topic that you have selected for today. But before that, I want to just update you real quick. Last night, I went to a film screening at USC Film School, or I think it was like literally the George Lucas building at USC. They got a theater on the ground floor there. And it was a screening of a film called Amerikatsi, which is the Armenian word for American. And it's a contention for the Oscar for best foreign film. So I've seen it before. This film is really good. And
Amerikatsi, okay.
Amerikatsi, T-S-I, K-A-T-S-A, Amerikatsi. And so the writer, director, and actor, it's all one guy. The writer, director, and main actor was there. His producer was there. The head of Armenian studies at USC ran the panel discussion afterwards. There was a USC film professor there as well, and a couple of very high-level attorneys that deal with crimes against humanity. It was like a who's who in that room, and I'm so glad I got there because I connected with a couple of them. I'm going to be setting up meetings with them. That was last night, right? I'm a busy guy, way too busy. All right, there's the update. All right, Joel, what are we talking about today?
Well, we are talking about the state of California.
Yeah, me and you.
That's right. That's me and you. Is anybody else in California on this little enterprise we have going here?
Let's see. Not off the top. Oh, yes. Who is it? Kenneth? I think Kenneth. Oh, maybe he's from the Bay Area. Kenneth, are you in California? I'm trying to recall. I know some of these people are in some of the places where they're from, but I think EU, somebody here. Hello, EU. She's here in California. And Kenneth, he left 2 years ago. Okay. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, and there's different. California's not one megalithic thing either. There's Southern California where you and I are, and there's San Francisco, which is a complete different animal. And you're LA and I'm San Diego, which are two complete different animals, although they're all becoming. San Diego is becoming more and more like LA. It went blue back in 2018. And
there's somebody from San Diego here, Nado Girl.
Nado Girl, all right.
Cool.
The state assembly passed a bill, AB 665, to expand mental health services for minors. And what this bill does, it allows minors for any reason to seek mental health counseling with some kind of facilitator. And I have the text of the bill. It's very vague in who these people are. And I think it's one person interpreting it said, it doesn't have to even be a licensed mental health professional. It just has to be someone who's someone maybe who's an intern under a licensed health professional. The 12-year-old can seek counseling and determine whether or not the parents are told or not. Now it's being touted as, I sent you a link. It's being touted as state is kidnapping your kids without your consent. And of course, the way they do it, there's like, oh no, that's a misinterpretation. There's nothing in the bill that says do not notify parents. There's a lot in the bill that says if the professional counseling your child consults with the child and they determine that the parents should not be informed, the parent won't be informed. So what this does is opens up an entire pathway for use, and mostly it seems to be mostly to enable transgender youth whose parents aren't going. Did I say a bad word? The people in transition.
Careful there. Can't even speak English anymore. Good grief.
I know. How do you do this, Michael? How do you do this all day? It seems to facilitate, Mark, who wants to be Mary, to do this. And but this started years ago. This all started back in the 90s. I remember early 2000s, there was a bill that said that a young girl, underage girl, who, shall we say, was with child and wished not to be, could have a procedure without the parents' consent. And I remember thinking at the time, there's no way that'll ever pass, naive as I was. But it did. So that's kind of started years ago, started the down the road of parents don't need to know what, and this is basically through schools. Schools are acting as the conduit to this. And it's to the point now where someone who's not even licensed and who doesn't, very good chance, does not have the worldview that parents are the ones really responsible for their children and really in charge of their children's lives. I was a teacher for 12, 15 years. I could tell you the most radical people do not think that parents are the ones who are in charge of their children's lives. They think they are. And parents often get in the way. I left many, more than one teacher staff meeting because I said, I can't talk about it. If you guys think that parents are a problem here and they're in the way of what we want to do with their kids, I'm out. And then
words of the state.
Yeah. And then of course, on one occasion later, two people came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh man, thanks for doing that. I would have never had the courage to do that." I'm like, well, you're the problem, then. You're part of the problem.
Exactly. And thereby goes the state of California, right?
Yeah, thanks a load for that. But yeah. So anyways, that's so it just brought up, like I said, California is this way. And like I said, I am in the slowest of all the major metropolitan areas in California to go blue. But we're there for long now. And so you and maybe who was it, Ken, have a little more experience living underground than I do. And I don't want to call it underground, but how are we to be the effective resistance to this? It might even tie in.
So I have a good friend who, he's known to this channel, a guy named Brian Godawa. And he was a California guy, Hollywood guy. He's a screenwriter and he's a novelist also. And how are we going to influence? How are we going to influence Hollywood? How are we going to influence the state of California? Because he and I became friends when I showed up at a talk he did about his movie was about to come out, and he's a Christian, and he was talking about God in the Matrix. He has a lecture that he does, and it's just real revelatory. It's like how Christian themes are pervasive through the most effective storytelling in film, etc. Even among those who don't know Jesus, they're still telling Christian themes. It's the Christian themes that make the stories interesting. It's self-sacrifice, right? When the hero lays down his own life for the innocent, right? Those are the most compelling stories, right? And he abandoned me here. He said, well, when I first met him, he says, if you want to work in Hollywood, why don't you live in Hollywood? So I moved to Hollywood and we became close friends, and I got a job in the industry, and then he up and ran out on me. No. So, but living here as a Christian, God has a calling on everybody's life. Every individual has a specific calling and a general calling, right? We're all called to serve him, love him. But you are you in your circumstances. You have your network of influences and who you're influenced by and who you influence. And And so in those circumstances, you are called to something. And I recognized my access into Hollywood. Some people might say, well, have you been preaching Jesus to all the people that you meet there? And I'm like, no, because if I did, I wouldn't have a job here.
Right.
Right. If I did that, I wouldn't be hired back. Right. If I came to work, so the way any career path is, it's networking, right? You have to know your task, you have to do your job well, but you have to network. People have to like you. And if everybody I worked with knew that the first thing out of my mouth was, or the second thing, or the third, or the 10th thing out of my mouth was, hey, you need to repent and turn to Jesus. I would not occur to those people to hire me again next time. Like, I like him, but he's got that side. And if I hire that person, it's probably not going to work, right? It's just inevitably going to be the case. And it's not that I'm hiding my faith. Au contraire, my faith says to do excellently, to be a light, right? To be excellent at what you do. That is glorifying God. That is what makes salt salty, right? That is light. By being a good person all around, you are reflecting Christ by having ethics and morals. And so, in being happy, right? Being joyful, right? Being joyful. Where do non-Christians get joy from? They don't. There's no such thing as true joy outside of Christ. And so, as a result, I've been networked in to the industry where I am suffering absolutely economically and, socially, and, my kids are exposed to stuff that I wish they weren't. And so it's like, it takes a toll, but I also know that I'm called to something, and God is showing, like the project I'm working on. It's like, I wouldn't have come across this project if God didn't bring me to Hollywood, get me deep. But I think the goal, and I'm just talking about me specifically, is to bring this project out of Hollywood and have it produced outside of Hollywood. But I had to go into Hollywood to get the project. Right. So that's my personal journey. I feel like I'm called to be in California. I'm called to be where I am, as much as I would absolutely love to live in Florida or Texas or Idaho, where I just visited a couple weeks ago. I would live there in a heartbeat. I would take my family there and go to the church, those churches, and but I am called to California.
Yeah, I think I am too. It's the only place I've ever known. I don't. You grew up in Phoenix area, so
I didn't grow up there. I was born there, but I've lived in New York and Kentucky and
okay, I didn't know this.
Northern California. Yeah, I've moved more than 30 times the first 20 years of my life.
Okay,
or is it 20 years? 20 times the first 20? I don't know. That was a little exaggeration, but I've moved a lot.
Oh, you military brat or what?
No.
One step ahead of the law.
None of my moves were for that exactly.
Okay,
but
all right.
Dysfunctional upbringing, parents looking for work and divorced parents and bouncing between them. So all kinds of different circumstances. But you are Southern California.
I'm an LA kid. Yeah. And like I said, it's all I've ever known. My wife is from the Midwest, and whenever we go back there, I tell, especially in the winter, if we go back for Christmas, I'm like, just try and make sure I don't die back there, because if I walk out of the house and there's a cloud on the horizon that's this big, it ruins my day. I mean, come on, I'm used to completely.
We are in California.
Oh yeah. So that is part of the sunshine tax, I guess you would call it. But it's a little deeper than that. I think I've told you this before, or I mentioned on these shows before. I have a pastor. I'm a church my wife went to a couple years ago when all the other churches were closed down, and we needed to worship somewhere. And he regularly tackles people who are moving out of California. And he says, don't do that. He said, you're here for a reason. And he said, what kind of soldier leaves the battlefield right when the battle is beginning? And at this point, my wife and I owned some property in Phoenix area, and we looked around different properties that are possibly moving. Just because we're one of those California people that's like, it's crazy here. These people are nuts. They're really crazy. But then when he said that, I'm like, oh, okay. So then maybe that's God's telling me, okay, Joel, you need to stay here. This is all you've ever known. Your wife, and you don't really want to move anyways. We've got this wonderful neighborhood in northern San Diego County, and it couldn't be a better spot other than the government that it's placed it under. And but then I went to the pastor and I said, okay, pastor, I will try and be a good soldier, but what kind of general are you going to be?
Oh,
because it's easy to say, oh, Christians, we need to, have influence. I don't see Christians having much influence. I see way more Christians being influenced by the world than I see Christians influenced, especially in California. It's in my old church, which was a fantastic church when we first went there. Slowly, over the years, I saw it going further and further left, and to the point where it shut down for 2 years almost. And it was a church with the most resources in probably Southern California. It could have stayed open, but they shut down to Virtue Signal, and now that church is on the decline. And there are snakes, Michael. There are snakes out there coming into the church, and they weren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. So that's another part of this problem. How do you stay that when there's no good underground network? How do you stay underground when there is no, what is it, the Maquis or whatever resistance? There's no, or Operation Nemesis or whatever.
Right.
How do you do that when you see your fellow Christians falling? Because there are, I guarantee you, I know dozens of Christians who vote consistently and faithfully for the government that does these kinds of things. And how, and it's not just, it's just politics. No, it's not. That's family right there. And
yeah, I had a conversation with my wife actually just a couple days ago, and I voiced my opinion politically, and she's like, "Don't say that around some of our church friends." And she said that, like, "Don't say that around some of our church friends." I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right." We and then she was talking about something, hearing a Christian on some, I don't know, like podcast or being interviewed that was making an argument for abortion, right? A Christian making an argument for, like, yeah. So this is that kind of that threshing, when there's persecution, like lockdowns and political, government fines levied. That's where you're tested, right? And thank God, right? It may be frustrating to see churches collapsing, but thank God those churches are failing, right? Thank God that way of life, that ideology, that compromise is going under. It's God doing it, right? He's cleansing his church. Right. And also thank God for technology like this, where you and I, two Californians on the right side of issues, right, that we can network, right? This is it's like a parachurch ministry where we can be connected, because we're called to be here, and there are those who are called away, and that's fine, and we should not judge them. But we are at war, right? It is a brutal war that God wins, and so we will dig in and arm ourselves. I mean, spiritually, for the censors, right?
Yes, that is,
and defend yourself, right? But I am heartened by seeing God at work, and that it's being exposed. As difficult as it is to go through it, California will be one of the last to turn, right? If California ever turns, it's going to be the last. It'll be like if the entire nation goes red, California, it'll be 49 states. I don't know Hawaii. I don't know about Hawaii. It'll be 48 or 49 states. It'll be California clinging to its totalitarian tendencies. It's crazy, but I think California will actually flip as well eventually.
You think so?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I don't know. I hesitate to put time frames, but I hesitate to even make predictions. I don't know if you do you keep up with Tucker on Twitter at all? Or
Not on
X?
Twitter, no.
So since he went off Fox, that's the only place I really hear him. I know there are people that on YouTube that take his stuff and put it on YouTube, and I just prefer to go to Twitter, but I don't go as often. But he's very, very concerned about this coming year, that we're in the 12 months that we're now within it, right? Well, I don't know, technically the new president will be, it's January 20th, right? When the new president takes off.
2025,
so, in 2025. So around January, we started a 12-month ticking clock for a new president. Yes. And some are saying we're not even going to have elections. There won't even be a presidential election. It's like, okay, what kind of scenario you try and game plan, and like people in generals in war, when they're preparing to attack, they have to game plan all these different scenarios. Well, what if this happens? Then we'll do that. What if this happens? Then we'll do that. And then when it starts, none of those things happen, and they have to at least have some plans in place.
Well, Mike Tyson's famous quote: "Everybody has a plan till you get punched in the mouth." All of a sudden, you're like, "Okay,
right,
yeah." But and in order to do that, go ahead. I'm interrupting.
No.
Oh no, I was just saying what you're saying. The generals do that because they know that that's their job. They're aware that, hey, my job is to go to war. I don't think a lot of generals are even aware here because you mentioned talking to some maybe more progressive liberal friends. Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. There's very little on the progressive side. There's very few people on the progressive side saying, no, don't say that. Don't offend our conservative people. There's no muzzle put on them. The muzzle's all on us on the conservative side. And I just don't see a lot of conservative people even acknowledging that, hey, there's a battle coming, whatever the size of the battle. I don't see a lot of preparation. I don't see a lot of plans. I don't see a lot of trusting in God. Okay, this is what we're going to do when this happens. And I know our guy Ben, I'm going to do a podcast later with him on leading the Philippians 4:4 life. How do you live a life of joy? But if you look at Philippians, it got me reading Philippians. I hadn't read in a long time. Leading up to that, the joy comes from standing firm in your faith in the face of trouble. That's where the joy comes. And so that's what I'm going to tell him when he asks me that question. I'm like, we stand, because if you keep caving and you keep deconstructing your faith or whatever, all this kind of stuff. It's funny. People that are doing that aren't finding joy. They're maybe finding acceptance. The cool kids like them, but the more I see them, it's mostly in Christian music, the more messed up they seem. But you're maybe more in tune with that side of things than I am.
Well, in Bible Every Morning, right just before this, we did Philippians 4. Actually, was part of our
daily reading. Really? Okay.
It was, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, it was Philippians 4, and so I went to Idaho. I met Doug Wilson, so I've known you several years, but it was only within the past several months or maybe year that you and I have Doug Wilson's a polarizing figure, right? He's like, you bring him up, people will be like, huh? Or, oh, right. It's literally, if you know who he is, you're either for him or against him. And so it's kind of like one of those litmus tests. I have a couple, like I told my friend Brian Goodall, I'm like, I can go meet Doug Wilson. He goes, really? He was like, really? You're gonna meet Doug Wilson? And then I mentioned it to another friend. He's like, Doug Wilson, why would you talk to him? So,
yeah.
But he is, here's the crazy thing. Like, he is a leader of what we're talking about, of the stand your ground, right? stick to it. Don't change. Don't compromise. Don't cater to the winds that blow left and right, every wind of doctrine or whatever. He's like, I went to meet him in between two events in his life. His wife went viral for something she like taught on a video like 10 years ago. Some troll found this little snippet that she said about spanking, and they posted it, and she got 3 million views or whatever. And so that happened just before I went. So that was kind of the hubbub. They were in the news because of that. And then immediately after I left, a prominent evangelical minister named Kevin DeYoung wrote a critique of what's going on in Moscow, very high profile, and it's elicited all these reactions. I'm like, I showed up there in the middle of that. That is the front lines of the battle for true Christianity. Literally, I'm telling you, Moscow is the front line where the most important issues are being argued. And Doug Wilson says to Kevin DeYoung, you and I agree on 99.9% of everything. We should be together. We can agree to disagree on these things. Instead, Moscow's being attacked for whatever reason. But
Moscow, Idaho, Moscow.
Right, Moscow. And they pronounce it Moscow. So there is that different Moscow, Idaho. And one of the things Doug says is all of their arguments, if they haven't come and visited and seen what's really going on here or whatever, all of their arguments are that Moscow has changed, that Doug Wilson has changed, that Doug Wilson is reacting, is reactionary to the attacks on him, and that's why this is happening. And it's not the case. He's like, no, we've just stood firm for 40 years, right? We've been building this thing for 40 years. We're not influenced by the pandemic and this and that. We stand our ground, and it's that firmness that everybody that comes up against it is trying to destroy it. And it's like, no, we're sticking to our guns. And so my mission is to become a part of that culture of Moscow and import it into my personal life, my family life, my neighborhood, my city, my state, right? Rather than go flee to where things are great, be one of those roots that sticks here and let the gospel of Christ, come up against me and follow. I mean, the enemies of the gospel of Christ come against me and fall away, because I am firm on my feet are planted firmly on the rock. So,
right. Yeah.
California.
And that's how you know.
There is hope for California.
Oh, well, no, there's always a remnant, right?
Yes.
God's people. There's always a remnant of God's people that are faithful, no matter what.
And the remnant, what that means, the remnant means those are the only ones left, right? Which means that they get to take over.
Well, yeah, or they're the ones that get to suffer. And one of the things too, my old podcast, I always used to do a segment on martyrs, and with Hebrews 11 and 12. A lot of people never saw in this life their reward when they stayed faithful. They were sawn in half, and they lived in caves, and they, were beheaded or whatever, suffered immensely without laying hold of the promise. And we don't even know who they are. Yep. But there's got to be millions of them, right?
And they were joyful in the midst.
They were joyful, but they never saw the success here. And I think that's really the divide in Christians right now. When you get right down to it, do we strive for comfort and acceptance here, or do we have eternal perspectives? Is this all we have? So do we acquiesce to make our lives quiet and comfortable, or do we have an eternal perspective and look at our mission and look at ourselves that way? Are we going to be obedient to eternity, or are we going to be subservient to what Francis Schaeffer called the tyranny of the urgent, right? What's right in front of us.
Yeah. The tyranny of the urgent. That's that we have to live in eternity and in the moment, and don't let the moment overtake the eternity, right?
But this moment, you're living for eternity. Eternity is your reward. That's what it's going to be, not here. The cool kids aren't going to like you here, but the coolest kids in the world are going to like you in eternity if you stay faithful. So,
Joel, our time is already up,
Michael.
And I love it. I love hanging out with you. I had another appointment scheduled at this time, and I'm like, wait, no, I'm meeting with Joel. I'm going to reschedule that other thing. So, but that other thing is coming up right now at 9. So I got to go make a phone call.
Well, go Gandalf, go. Don't.
I love you, brother. Good to see you.
Love you too, Michael. See you
Bye,
next time.
everybody.
Bye, everybody. Good show.